Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Somebody Should Have Told Me podcast. I am your host, Miss MajistyDennis, and this is a podcast where we talk about our convictions, our career, and our coins. And I am so excited today because we are going to be re examining our convictions as we often do. And you guys know that we did a 5-part surviving purity culture series that we kicked off back in March of this year. And I felt the Lord drop a little something in my spirit. He let something sizzle in my spirit. And so I wanted to kick off today's episode, which I really feel like is going to end up being another series. And so today we're going to be talking about purity culture in the pews. Yes, purity culture in the pews. And what I really want to do with this episode and ultimately this series is I want to really shine a light on how the pulpit is taught this teaching one way, and I really want to put a lens up to the women that have been affected by that, men alike, but I try to stick with where I have the experience. I have the most authentic experience as a Black woman. I've been living in this skin for 32 years and wouldn't have it any other way. And so I really want to shine a light on the impact of how some of the erroneous teachings has crept into the church. And so as you put your seatbelts on, okay, as we dive into this series, re-examining your convictions, reevaluating your theology can definitely be a scary thing. I feel like God just kind of glided me into it. It was not something that, I ever said to myself, I'm going to go through some deconstruction process or anything. It kind of just happened for me. And I was like, Lord, hold me, Jesus, okay? Because the things that God was revealing to me literally could not be denied. And so I do have my notes today because I don't want to forget anything. And this series is so special to me, what I hope for you to gain. And so if you are eavesdropping on this conversation, I know that a lot of times, we have heard the teachings of purity culture, and so it's so redundant that it almost feels like it's the right thing to say. And so I know a lot of the messaging from the pulpit, you continue to permeate this message because you've heard nothing else. And I would like to put a little spotlight, also volunteer my hand as an example, and let you in on some of my community of women who have been affected by this messaging. And so as you put your seatbelt on, as we go into this, I need to let you know ahead of time what I'm saying and what I'm not saying. So when I was learning about how people were re-examining purity culture, and where they were landing, after a while I started to realize that each person landed somewhere different, okay? And that is the importance of you learning to manage your convictions. And I love the way that my pastor says it, Pastor Darius Daniels, he was talking about the spirit of error and how people feel like you have to protect grace from being abused. And I just want to reiterate my commitment to you on the Somebody Should Have Told Me podcast, that it is never my intention to frame my words in a way that would make you feel like you cannot work out your own soul salvation with fear and trembling before God. Okay. So when we talk about your convictions on this podcast, your conviction is so unique to who you are as a person. I truly believe that God, as the Holy Spirit, is instructing you, and that is a moment by moment experience that should be carrying with you and flowing with you throughout everything that you do. I believe God takes into account who we are as the Holy Spirit leads us and guides us. And so it is very possible for God to be clearly saying something to me that he is not saying to you. And you know what that's called? conviction. And that's okay if different people land on different places with that. And so I want you to feel safe enough to hear this information, digest it, and break it down to, how it works for you, or you may find that it doesn't work for you at all. Okay, so additionally, with this series, some of you may be pastors or clergymen or preachers, itinerant ministers, men in general that may come over here to eavesdrop on the conversation, which I think is wonderful. And I am so glad you are here, because I think it is important that you get the opportunity to have a front row seat on how this teaching is affecting those that you are leading. And so oftentimes I think that the purity culture teachings, many, because, right, that is my life, knowing so many, my closest community is like clergymen, right? And it's just now over the last 4 years, butted into something else post pandemic. But I have always, been a church kid, grown up in church, right? And then had my first collegiate experience, which was Bible college. So, and then having an itinerant ministry of my own. So, literally, my peers, both my age, right? And then my vast network of people are clergymen. So what I really want you to do is take a full look at how these teachings have landed in your pews. Simmer, Selah, okay? And so in addition to that, I want to kind of walk you back on how I arrived at my lens on purity culture. Additionally, the thing that you need to know is that my personal conviction is abstinence until marriage. I think that is the right thing to do. I think that that is what God wants from you. What I don't think is that if you decide to have sex outside of marriage, that it is the unforgivable sin. And so when I'm using the word purity culture, and I will continue to reiterate that, it is the addition to things that God did not say about a sexual ethic in the scripture, okay? And so what that often looks like is strict dress codes, or really just dress codes in general, okay? If you believe in the New Testament, if you're trying to live under the new covenant, okay? And we can talk about these things because of the kind of podcast this is. You already know. You know your word, okay? So that looks like heavy restrictions on women, a suppressed view on women. These are purity culture ideologies. These are teachings that degrade the value of a woman, both with or without her husband. Teachings that diminish a woman in any capacity, but most typically, and what is very prevalent within purity culture, is teachings that will diminish your value as based on your sexual history and your sexual past, okay? And so a lot of the purity culture messaging, right, is things that if you are not a virgin, that you are not valuable, that you are not worthy of marriage, that you have disobeyed God in an unredeemable way. And I want to reiterate here again, as I have several times before, that anybody that is telling you any ideology that sends the message that you cannot be redeemed is in fact an antichrist teaching. Jesus Christ is our Redeemer. No matter what you have done, if you got one body, no body, 10 bodies on you, you can be redeemed, okay? White as snow. All right. So part of that messaging for me, and I had, just growing up, I was born into a Christian family, saved family. All of my like aunts, uncles, several of my great one of my great uncles is a pastor, and all of these things, like just very much a ministry family, loving the Lord, raised in the fear of God. And so I had some very significant encounters with God from a very young age. And so, in addition to what I was taught and the way I was raised with my family, I was always sure about God because of the personal encounters that I had with Him on my own. And so, me hoping that other people would be as sincere about God, and people do their best, okay, but unfortunately have still managed to jack it up. And here we are talking about all the things that someone should have told us 20 years ago, okay? So, so um, with that, I think for me, in my youth, in my naivety, it was easy for people to slip in a lot of things and say God said it, because I was assuming they would approach God's ways with the same reverence that I had, because I knew not to play with God, okay? And so it was just very easy at a younger age to tell me something God said, and I just was like, okay, because I'm thinking, surely you're going to take this seriously. Unfortunately, that is not the case. Thank God for the opportunity to reconcile these ideas, and we're moving forward. Okay. So when I was 12, I had a purity ceremony where I had a beautiful gown, beautiful gown. Several of the members at my church at the time, we walked down the aisle. We did a 16-week program of Joshua Hart's I Kiss Dating Goodbye book. And then many of you may be familiar with the crumpled up flower. And they talk about deflowering, which they will tell women basically that your value cannot be reclaimed after you have sex. Even though once you're married, and even if you were not, men be wanting to have sex with you multiple times. That's neither here nor there. I'm just saying what I'm saying. But this is what was going on at the time. Okay. So, have that going on. As from the age of 12, and I'm like fully bought in. Okay, we received our true love's waits ring, we walked down that aisle, we married the Lord, and we had a reception afterwards with a fine dining and dinner, and we just celebrated that time. Okay. And to that, I would say no. I know that the ability to like put your faith on display is admirable, but I think there are things that the scripture publicly tells us to do when we want to make a proclamation of our faith. Those things include communion, confession of Christ, right? Testimony, baptism, water baptism. Those are the things that you need to be doing if you want everybody to know you are saved and where you stand with the Lord. All the other riffraff, I don't know how we got here, but we need to stop it, okay? Because I am a long way from 12 years old. And a lot happens, okay? At the wonderful age of 32, this is a new body. New things are happening. New information is necessary. Okay? As we move forward. And for the girls, they get it. For the 30 girls, the 40 girls, you already know what I'm saying. Okay? So that was kind of how I started out. Now, when it comes to my cross-cultural lens of faith, of course, so actually, not of course, I was born and raised in Tacoma, Washington, okay, which not DC, the other side, the Pacific Northwest, as far north as this country goes, that is where I am from, Tacoma, Washington. It's about 30 minutes from Seattle. And so it is very multicultural. So when I say multicultural, not just black and white, but you're talking Hispanic, Pacific Islander, literal people who know what tribe they are from, as far as Native Americans. I mean, just what's my other friend that I had in school? What is it called? Samoans, yes. I mean, just a lot of cultures that I have not even seen in Texas since I moved here. It is just quite a melting pot, but also um, predominantly white right there. And so a lot of my experience coming up in schools, I would often be the only black girl in my class, and many of the things that come with that experience. If you know, you know. And then when I was 15, my family moved to Dallas, Texas. Okay. So if you've been watching the pod, you know that part. But that was kind of like, as far as like geographically where I lived. But when I was growing up, often went to church with my grandma as well as my mom. Okay. And so when I would go to church with my grandma was Baptist at early on. And then she switched to the Kojic church. But even my grandma growing up, she grew up Catholic, ironically. And so from the time that I can remember, we were in the Baptist church, then we went on to the Kojic church. And then the times that I was going to church with my mom, after she got married, that church was Pentecostal. She ended up going non-denominational and into the apostolic, and things like that. And then, just any family that was connected to was taking me to church. It doesn't matter. Aunt, uncle, we did not skip any Sundays, okay? And so I was always, you know what I'm saying, going from this denomination to that denomination. So when my family moved to Dallas, Texas, my itinerant mind ministry started to thrive like immediately. And so from 16, about 15, 16 on, I was ministering itinerantly, okay? If you know about my mind pictures, I have like a clergy robe. So I literally spent my teenage years literally in a clergy robe, covered from my neck to my toes. I've got my jazz shoes on, my hands covered with gloves. And what that did from a brand perspective was it allowed me to be able to take the engagements that I needed to take, regardless of denomination, with minimal preparation and without having to make a lot of adjustments, because I was always ready for anything. So my attire was just suited, for wherever we went. So I have basically run the gamut when it comes to denominations and all of these things. And then as I got older, so this is my itinerant journey. And then as I got older, I did my associate's degree online, and I still wanted the campus experience. Excuse me. And at that time, even personally, the church home, whatever church home I had, was a predominantly Black church. I went through some personal and family challenges that I could never understand how people would like turn away from God, until I came into some challenges. And I talk about it in my previous book, From Religion to Revival. I could never understand how people would just like immediately be done with God, be done with church, until I kind of hit that moment. And I literally remember thinking that if God was as he had been presented to me, I did not want him. This may be the first time I've said that out loud, but I knew I was like in a deep thought, like, this is the crossroad here. So my spiritual father had recommended at the time that I go to a Bible college. And this Bible college is evangelical. It does have multi-cultures to it. Multiple, nationalities do take part in this experience. But the theology, the music, the culture, what they find to be acceptable, all of it points to evangelical. Okay. And so with that, but okay, so but at this time, this evangelical experience I found to be very refreshing for me, because at where I was just emotionally and with what I had going on, I just could not take like almost like church as it was. And so going into the evangelical environment, the Bible college that I went to was so opposite of anything that I experienced. It was almost like I hadn't been in church before. Now, while I was there, I absolutely loved that experience. I felt it was one of the best things that I had ever done at the time. I always told myself I would never regret it, and I still don't think that I do. Um, so that was that experience, but I got to be very well submersed in that culture, coupled with the personal dynamics that I had growing up in the North for the first half of my life anyway. And so when I am speaking to these cross-cultural dynamics of how I have witnessed purity culture play out in both my life and the lives of others and those closest to me, um, this is where I gain that background, and this is where I gain that lens, because within my Bible college experience, I had the opportunity to live with my white roommates and see how their faith affected their daily lives, right? And their personal lives and their personal elements. And so with that, me going into Bible college at this time, this was my sorry, Jesus, this was my first experience living with white people. And so look, honey, I really got submerged in the culture, but this was my first experience, um my first collegiate experience, excuse me. So whereas, a lot of people may go to a typical 4-year university, that was not my experience. And so when I talk about my network being very robust of pastors, when you look around today at the landscape of the church, right? Because of where I went to school, many of these folks are my peers. So a lot of your leading influencers within the evangelical space, I went to school with them. Um, know many of them personally, know their families, husbands, wives, all of it, you name it, because of this experience that it does, at one point was known for producing a lot of the forthcoming evangelical leaders, that we now see today, because it's been about 10 years. And so when I was going to this Bible college, I probably started classes there at about the age of 20. Now, y'all, and this is something that I didn't even, excuse my lash and what is going on. I didn't even realize this until I was talking to one of my classmates some time ago. It never even occurred to me. So on top of me having the I Kiss Dating Goodbye traditional purity culture experience from the age of 12, now by the time I go to college and I am an adult, right? A budding adult, a young adult, the way the college was set up is that, of course, there was women in one dorm, okay, and then the men's dorm was like literally across the freeway. And it was in the rules and expected within the college that there would be no public display of affection, and marriage was highly emphasized. Within the campus and all of these things, that I literally did not realize, probably up until a couple of months ago when I reconnected with a friend from college, that I learned to go these prolonged times without a physical affection, because even as I was being introduced to adulthood, that was the norm of even the college that I went to. And so the college was very strict. So unlike a traditional seminary, with this school, this was like a Christian school. So you had to proclaim Jesus is Lord to go to this school. You cannot go in there and just explore it and be like, hey, I'm going to see what's what. No, you serve Jesus or you don't come here, you know? And so that's how the school was. And so when I'm talking about, in addition to things that contribute to purity culture, the unnecessary set of rules. And so if you are looking now and seeing where my foundation and my upbringing is leading you to, at one point, unfortunately, I used to pride myself on that, is that I did not have friends. My God, if you're watching the visual, my top lash keeps sticking to my lower lash line, and I'm just trying to make it to the episode. My God. Excuse me. Thank and praise. Okay. So, what was I saying? If you so at one point I prided myself on having a network of all people who held, abstinence as a core value, and there's nothing wrong with abstinence. I still think abstinence is the optimal way, abstinence until marriage, right? But what happens is, when you have gone extended times with a lack of affection, you have to regress in a certain kind of way, that does not agree with the mind and the heart of God concerning sex, to be able to turn the switch off, to be able to abstain for long periods of time. And I'm here to say it, turn it back on. Okay? So at one point, I prided myself on having a community that I only knew people who abstained. Okay? So now, where we are in life, we are able to fast forward 10 years of this. And I have got to do a live case study on how everybody's doing, where those ideologies that came with purity culture, whether it's building out this negative self-image, and how these people have landed, okay? And this is how we are observing purity culture in the pews. Because let's get back to my notes, okay? So that's the foundation. Okay, so I want to talk about how I feel that purity culture, and maybe I just need to flow in the spirit and go this way. Purity culture has robbed specifically Black women and women of their autonomy. And what I find is women just sit in neutral, right? So you have this preaching, right, that all you tell women to do is abstain. Okay? And here is what I want to talk about, because who is making the rules? Do you really sit back and think about the fact that there is a whole theology that is like in the substratum of the way that we practice the Christian faith? It is in the substratum of Christian culture that says, oh, if you wait long enough, it is the wait that will qualify you for marriage. No. Okay? That is not like thou shalt wait and then be married. And here's what I've also learned is that there are people, and maybe it's just me, that me being the type A person that I am, that if you say wait, wait means wait. And so you have so many women that don't know how to live, don't know how to enjoy life, don't know how to take their life off of hold, because you act like the other side of bliss is forbidden to them, you know, because they're not married. What I did here, okay, because, I was in a discussion with a dear loved one who, as I was saying, wait, rebutted back to me, you should trust. Herein, let me say this to the pulpit. If you thought that by telling women to wait for marriage, that landed as trust God for marriage, I am here to tell you from the front row, it did not land that way. If you had that you wanted us to trust God for marriage, we could have did that. But that is not what y'all said. Y'all said wait, okay? And so the girls are out here waiting, okay, into their 30s, into their 40s, into their 50s. These are people I know by name These are people that I can go through my contacts and dial their number that are still waiting on the Lord. Because if y'all said wait and meant to imply trust, that is not what happened. So if we could circle back, okay, always trust God in all you do, but action will be required on your part. Mm. Mm, 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 mm. Okay, so that is how I arrived at my lens of my cross cultural observations of purity culture. Um, let's see. Do we want to get into some things? Should we do this now, or do we go into a part two? Okay, I'm gonna give you some profiles. Okay, and these are some people that I know. And we're just gonna call them friend number 1, friend number 2, friend number 3, friend number 10. Okay, and I just want to give you a highlight of where I know these women are today. Friend number 1 told me probably close to 10 years ago now, and she said, Majesty, I know that I am now married, but I still feel that even though I'm married, right, and I'm sexually active, I still feel that it is wrong. And I was like, girl, you are married, make it count for us all. Do your thing. And what I thought was should just be like an instant quick conversation, she still multiple years into marriage, you know, and multiple children in, still does not feel comfortable with, this is something that is okay for me to proceed with doing. So you have the story of friend number 1. Okay, so let's say we have friend number 9. Okay, friend number 9 used to be bothered by the ideal of men asking her, Christian men asking her questions about her thoughts around sex, whether or not she was sexually active. And I just want to tell you, there are several men that the teaching that we got as women, as far as abstaining and all of these things, never even heard of these things. Okay, gone. Never even thought of it. And she was offended by these men asking these questions. And I was like, you actually need to give him a solid answer. You actually should be having conversations about sexual expectations, as you're moving forward in dating. Because what I now know, me myself personally, MajistyDennis, knows is that sometimes what a Christian man is asking is that sex switch may be off now, but is it ever going to be, is it ever going to come back on? And so I can truly say that I understand that perspective now, because I have had friends that still cannot reconcile things that are not even remotely a sin, no matter any kind of theological way you want to dice it up. Okay? So that's friend number 1 and friend number 9. Friend number 2. And this kind of hurts my heart, is that she just went all the way in and to the evangelical movement. And I feel like that theology and that way, and we'll dive into it in another episode, really like got her to a point where her very existence was no longer valued. And because of how her husband postured himself as a man, he was really able to demean her, and she accepted it under the guise of, this is the authority of a man, but thinking that just because abstinence is in the picture, that everything is all right. And so that mental verbal abuse has, and God forbid, That mental and verbal abuse has gone so far that she has nearly been committed to the mental hospital because of the way that they find it acceptable to interact. And she believes that, that this is a moral high ground and this is a level of spiritual maturity because of the treatment that she accepts from said husband. Unfortunately, these are some of your prominent evangelical leaders. Okay. And then lastly, for this episode, friend number 3. I had a conversation with friend number 3, and she was sincerely pleading with me, just like, Majesty, please go get your fertility checked. Like, no one ever said anything. It's the only messaging coming from the pulpit is don't have sex, right? And then you add to the list of the thou shall nots. And then there are women who don't know what to do. Women who don't know what to do surrounding their reproductive health. There are women who don't know what to do concerning their fertility, creating a fertility plan because you have permitted and made up these rules that a prolonged period of waiting is some kind of prerequisite to be loved, which once again undermines the very foundation and premise of our salvation. For God so loved the world, everything that he did, him taking the price for sin, is even based out of his love. Whether he is rebuking or correcting, it comes from his love. You have women that take on this ideology of prolonged waiting, prolonged singleness, prolonged abstinence with no information, no forward moving information, that you abstain well beyond your childbearing years with no information, no data, no blood work, no egg count, no nothing around what's going on with your body. Okay. And it's almost like the infantilization of Black Christian women makes you feel like you don't have permission to know these things, right? And which is why, even with the Surviving Purity Culture series, I wanted to come and present women to give you the information so that you're not shooting in the dark and you can figure out how you need to navigate, whether it's from a health standpoint, and that is up to you and your conviction to manage. Anyways, this was great. Like I said, I feel a series in my spirit. And so I'm going to come back with another installment of Purity Culture in the Pews. So stay with me, share this episode if you found it helpful, repost, tag the podcast, follow us on social media at the Somebody Should Have Told Me podcast. And I've been your host, Miss MajistyDennis. Until next time, bye.